All right. As per request, um, I shall give a rather brief history of the country of Libya as far as its place in the world and basically how it was formed. To get into everything would take literally ages, so I'm just going to give a brief overview and touch on some hot spots. Um, as we know, Gaddafi has been in power since I believe September 1st of 1969, which is a rather long time. Most despots or leaders like that typically have rather long uh, reigns of power due to just either sheer brutality or eliminating political opposition, whether it be rival tribes, which in that region, in the Middle East in general, in North Africa, tribal politics typically rules all. It's just how it is over there. So, but anyway, a lot of people know at least a brief part of Libyan history from World War II. Obviously, there were several battles in Tobruk and even a siege of Tobruk. Some of the countries involved in that were Australia, Czechoslovakia, I believe Poland, obviously the UK, and Italy. Even the Australians had some interaction in World War II as far as Tobruk is concerned. So people do have some knowledge of Libya as far as that. There was pretty great tank battle that happened there or near there. As far as ancient times, Libya is or would have been part of either the Phoenician or the Carthaginian empires. Obviously, that's a whole different story altogether, and it really has no relevance to the Libya of today, other than it having a lot of archaeological sites and a lot of history in the country itself, which is extremely interesting, but that's a totally different topic. The Romans also had, I believe the Romans were the first to unite the entirety of what we would consider Libya today. And under Roman Empire, there was actually relative peace, more so than other times during history. Um, After the Romans came the Islamic conquests. I believe Islam, I'm not positive, but I know it started somewhere around 500 AD, somewhere around there. I don't know the exact dates or anything like that, or times, but it's around there. It's about 1500 years old. The Islamic conquests obviously swept through the Middle East fairly quickly, as well as North Africa, and that's why you have a lot of North African countries that are Islam. They're Muslim countries. A lot of that is brought on by also like Gaddafi, brutal dictators of what we would consider Islam today. Islam back then and Islam today are two completely different things. Although a lot of people still follow that original religion, a lot of them have twisted it. They may read from the same book, however, they use it to their advantage as far as politics and securing a nation like Libya or Iraq or Afghanistan with the Taliban. After the Islamic conquests, you have a lot of back and forth between the Spanish, the French, and the Ottoman Empire. And again, later on in history, you have a lot of Turkish and Italian going back and forth, which I believe was the early 1900s, somewhere around 1911, 1912. There were conflicts between Italy and the Turks trying to secure the whole of Libya. Um, in between all of that, you have what they would consider the Barbary Wars because of the Berbers that were prevalent in that area. And basically, what happened with that was the Ottoman Empire saw fit to allow pirates to establish themselves on the coasts, including Algeria, Libya, Tunisia. I don't believe they got into Egypt at all. They may have, I'm not positive, but they used that as a method of securing the land, and then they would basically give those pirates and their land protection. They would make them protectorates of the Ottoman Empire, and that would allow the Ottomans to economically and politically have power over that specific part and eventually try to take over the entirety of it. However, the Spanish and the Italians, obviously, and the French as well, didn't allow that to fully happen. Eventually, the Ottoman Empire obviously collapsed, and after that, things pretty much went to hell as far as that's concerned. Obviously, World War II, as I mentioned, in September of '69, that's when Gaddafi came to power. Some of the more notable things about Libyan history was their involvement in the Yom Kippur War, which obviously involves Israel. Although I don't believe that any Libyan army regulars had any involvement in the war, Libya did send, I think they estimate, approximately $1 billion to Egypt, and as well as equipment and fighter aircraft and stuff like that. And we all know how that turned out. It didn't turn out very well for any of the Arab states. Israel's Air Force was extremely successful. In some cases, they were able to defeat air attacks in 30 minutes, an hour, stuff like that. So Israel was obviously on top of the ball as far as that's concerned militarily. Which, oddly enough, after the support of Libya to Egypt, they ended up having a conflict as well. It didn't really, it was mostly border clashes, and not very many people died. I think on the Libyan side was about 400, and on the Egyptian side was somewhere about 100, I read. So it wasn't really a gigantic war, but it was definitely a conflict between the two countries. Also, to note that Gaddafi also supported other wars in the region, and that would include supporting the Ugandan government, and supporting in the Second Congo War, supporting the government of the Congo, which would be I think it's the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Other incidents would be the Gulf of Sidra incidents, where RF-14 Tomcats, which is an exemplary plane. If you ever want to read about those, they're an absolute. The history of that airplane is brilliant. But they were able to shoot down 2 Su-22s and 2 MiG-23s, and some people believe that also led to the bombing of Libya, and that was all under the Reagan era. But as far as other involvement in the world, a lot of people believe that Gaddafi used oil money after the West helped build up his oil producing capabilities, that he used a lot of that money for terrorism, i.e. the Lockerbie bomber, other incidents like that. And there's also some people that believe, whether you do or not doesn't really matter, some people believe that he actually supports terrorism in the United States, i.e. the Black Panther Party, as well as, I believe it's the Nation of Islam, and that would all be religious or religion-related things, if he actually does. I'm sure the FBI and CIA have tons of paperwork on it, and they would probably know better than I would, just reading off the internet or reading a book, whether or not there was actual financial backing there. I would be willing to bet, and this is just my personal opinion, people can disagree if they want, but I would be willing to bet that there's not only Gaddafi, but there's also other countries that support those organizations. And I'm not saying that those organizations are terrorists. Some people would argue that. But I do believe that they get financial backing from other Islamic groups, whether that be a country or a group itself. So that's basically a rundown of the history of Libya and a little bit of my opinion, but for the most part it's fact. But anyway, any more requests and I'll be happy to do some research, or based off my own knowledge I'll be able to put that out.